Aloha! Welcome to Dupliart, where I take the duplicates we find during our Blind Bag Hags gallimaufries and art with them. For this Dupliart, we have Stitch. For this project, I decided to do a wave. I wanted to do a large sculpture. I've never done one before, and I thought this would be a good opportunity. The first step, of course, is to bulk out an armature, because this would be too heavy and too fragile to do completely in clay. I shaped it all out in aluminum foil. Until I was happy with it. And then it was time to start covering it. The first step is to coat it with translucent clay. That way I'd have a good surface to adhere to. I just used regular Sculpey white to make a base. It wasn't going to show. I didn't have to smooth it completely down either because I would be using that texture to add more character to the wave. And it's just push and mush into shape. Once I was happy with that, it was off to the oven for a pre-baked bake, 250 degrees for 20 minutes. For the top layer, I mixed a whole bunch of different blues in with translucent clay and a little bit of white. And then I decided to streak it, really thin snakes of clay in different shades of blue, and lay them across. I put it through the pasta maker, folding it over. Just the trick is, fold it in the same direction, put it through the machine in the same direction to get the stripiness. You can also cut out and reposition your stripes to however you'd like them when you're doing this. Once I was happy with how it had turned out, it was time to start covering the structure. I tried to incorporate some of the edge of where I put the clay through the pasta machine, and it made it kind of jagged and ripped and neat looking, and so I decided to try and preserve that on the ends a little bit. And using my ball tool and many other tools, I textured the entire surface. And you can see by not leaving a smooth surface on the white clay underneath, it helps to give more character to the texture. I didn't completely cover everything with the clay at this point because I'm going to be adding the white breakwaters, and I left some of that white exposed. Don't worry, that's all going to get covered up. I was going for a barrel wave, but as I was sculpting it, I realized that the surfboard was going to end up in a hole, and I decided against that, so I was going to make it just more rough on the edges and give an illusion of a collapsing wave. Next, it was on to shading with pastels. I started with the darkest blue along the bottom edge. This is the most satisfying stage, in my opinion, because you can just see all the work you put into the texture really pop. So I start with the darkest blue at the bottom and work my way up to the lighter blues, kind of highlighting what I didn't see underneath, some of the way that it rippled. And then I'm on to mica powder. I just wanted to see how it would look against it, and I really liked it, so I started again with the darker mica powder first, and then the lighter mica powder above for highlights. I did a lot of this work on Twitch, so if you'd like to see more of my crazy process, please come visit me and follow to see when next I'm arting. So it's back and forth between the mica powders and the pastels to create that blue, really deep ocean effect that I was going for. I am going to bake all of this prior to putting any more clay on top of this to really seal that in. Plus, I can handle the sculpture better and not worry about mushing or smudging any of the pastel work I've already done. And then I go back over the surface with a baby wipe and just kind of lightly touch the surface to pull off some of the color and again add to the streak and the character. Once I'm happy with that, it's back in the oven. While that was in the oven, it was time to shape out the surfboard. I just used regular Sculpey white and I pressed it out to the thickness that I wanted, and using my fingers I pulled and mushed at the same time to elongate it. And then I used the side of a stamp that I have. I've never actually used a stamp, I've only used it as a tool, and helped round off the edges and push things to where I needed them to go using the paper guide I had cut out earlier. And then using the parchment paper, I draped it over the edge and pulled from the inside outward to create that bevel along the edge. And it's off to the oven for the surfboard. I did add the fin off camera. Once the piece was out of the oven and cooled, I used more translucent clay and started shaping in the bottom wave where the surfboard would rest. Again with the Sculpey white, because this was going to be the understructure, and I would be covering it with more blue. Just shaping it into a wave where the surfboard can sit. And then I covered the bottom layer with that blue again. Push and mush and texturize. On the smaller wave, I did go down to a smaller ball stylus to create the texture around there, and went from the inside and pulled outward to kind of curve over the edge of that wave. I'd be adding more white to create the breakwater on it. Once I was happy with that, it was time to shade that part. And more mica powder, of course. I was really liking the shine effect I was getting with it. And back to the oven again. For the wave cap and breakwater, the camera really doesn't pick it up, but I did create a Skinner blend with the translucent clay and frost glitter white clay, and use the translucent side of it towards the blue in the wave cap. I tried to create more character with that. I tried to keep the edge of the wave more upright. When you bake clay in the oven, sometimes it can droop, and this was going to add to my effect. However, I had to make sure that it was thick enough that if it did droop, it wouldn't break. It's very difficult to create the illusion of breaking water with the clay actually not touching. So you have to be very careful and pay very close attention to how thick the clay is and where it's thickest. It's all about knowing your materials and working with them rather than against them. I added more of the blend to the lower wave, but where it is on the piece, there was no way to really film it well, so I apologize for that, but you'll see it eventually. Prior to baking, I dusted everything with an iridescent white mica powder. I used painter's tape to make the stripe along the center of the surfboard, and by putting the tape on there, as you see, I was able to put a clip and hang it so that it could dry and I could paint both sides at the same time and get it done quicker. It's very satisfying to pull off the tape to see a nice crisp line. I covered the surfboard in about 3 coats of UV resin. I'm actually the most proud of the surfboard. I really like that piece a lot. I had not really decided how I wanted the bottom of this piece to turn out. I was thinking at first to create a beach, but this wave was so big I thought it would look more like a tsunami. So I decided to scrap that and I went with just the blue clay again on the bottom to just seal it off. Prior to applying the resin, I laid out strips of tape that overlapped so that it would coat the bottom of the structure and give me something to pour on. The first step was using a dark Sapphire Blue UV resin along the bottom, and I just dripped it and let it go where it wanted to go, and then I went back in with a brush and pulled it up and under to seal the edge. Next, I used a blue-green UV resin in the center part. Again, I dripped it very thickly and used the brush to pull it up and then down, and I pulled the dark blue into the blue-green and back down and let it go where it wanted to go along all that texture I created. I used white UV resin along the area where the blue and the white clay meet, pulling some of the blue up into the white and some of the white down into the blue, and then I coated the top part with just clear UV resin. And it's time to go out in the sun. While applying the resin, I was very mindful of where the sun was going to be on this piece, so I did not apply UV resin under the lip of the wave. That was a second coating. Even though I'd scrapped the idea of creating a beach along the front of my wave, I couldn't let it go. I had an idea to keep the beach and create a place where I could put the surfboard if I didn't want to always display it on the wave. I've also never made a wooden fence before, and I thought this might be an interesting opportunity. A lot of the reference photos I was looking at for beach scenes with surfboards in the sand showed them resting along a white picket fence. I used Sculpey Pearl and translucent clay mixed together, pushed it through my pasta machine on the thickest setting, cut it into strips. I cut skewers to use to string the wood planks along. So I took each rectangle, placed it down, added the skewers, and sandwiched the other one on top. I finished out each of these wood planks the same way. Piece on the bottom, planks in between, sandwich on top. Then I textured up the surface, streaking it, making that wood grain. I had thought to add this to the beach, but then I thought I might want to move this around in the future, so I didn't adhere it to the beach. So again, I created a small armature and kept using the surfboard to make sure that it would fit in there snugly. Once that was shaped out, I used a mix of beige and a pinch of darker brown clay to create a beach colored sand color and covered that armature completely. Pushing and mushing and texturizing. Pushing it down, making sand dune-ish looking bits. And then I used a skewer to scratch out ohana. I used a toothbrush to tamp a texture into the surface all over it. Of course, I used pastels to shade. However, I started with a lighter pastel because I wanted more of that color to adhere, because this color will darken once it's baked. And then I used the darker pastel to highlight ohana. And I really liked the beach, but it was a little plain, so I decided to add palm leaves at the ends. I used a skewer to draw a line in the center and marked out where I wanted the slits in the frond. Used my X-Acto knife, and with my silicone tip tool I mushed it out and smoothed it along those lines and added more streaks of texture to it. Used my pastels for shading. translucent clay, applied them to both ends of the beach scene. Then it was time for the oven for all these pieces. Once everything was out of the oven and cooled, I added 2 female flowers that I had in the stash at both ends to complete the look. And here he is, all finished up, bright in the sun. I'm sorry, through the leaves. I actually like it. I think the sunlight hit that to make it look like even more breakwater. And you can see how the surfboard stands. I really liked making this. This was a lot of fun, and I think it looks like a wave. Our other duplicate decided to join the scene, and he's body surfing up there in that wave. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you'd like to see more unboxing fun, please follow our Blind Bag Hags channel. Link is down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.